Hey everyone, Noir here. Let's get into today's Reddit story.
I never imagined things would end up this way. I never thought I would wake up one morning questioning everything I believed about my marriage. It all started on what seemed like a completely ordinary evening while I was waiting for my wife to come home after another long shift at work. She was running late, but that wasn't unusual. Most nights she came home exhausted, barely saying a few words before dropping onto the couch or heading straight to bed. That had become our normal routine, but that night felt different. She walked in much later than usual, and the front door slammed behind her much harder than it normally did. It wasn't only the noise that caught my attention. I could hear her footsteps echoing through the hallway. They sounded heavy, uneven, almost like she was dragging herself with every step. At first I assumed she was simply more exhausted than usual. Then I saw her. The second I looked at her, I knew something wasn't right. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes looked half closed, and she struggled to keep her balance. "Hey," I said quietly, knowing she usually hated talking about work after a long day. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked past me into the kitchen and started opening and closing cabinets without any real purpose before finally taking out a bottle of wine. Her movements were jerky and unsteady, more than what I would expect from someone who had simply had a rough day. I couldn't explain it, but I immediately felt that something had changed. "Are you okay?" I asked carefully. She turned toward me, her eyes unfocused. "Yeah, I'm fine, just had a rough night." She forced a small smile, but it didn't look genuine. I could tell she had been drinking, but I didn't mention it. At that moment, I had no idea how much alcohol she'd already had. I watched her pour herself a glass of wine while the bottle shook slightly in her hands. I had never seen her like this before, and it worried me. Still, I decided not to push the issue. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe she was simply exhausted. Whatever it was, she looked like someone trying hard to act normal, even though she clearly wasn't. She dropped onto the couch with her glass of wine, now about half full, and stared at the television without really paying attention to anything on the screen. I stayed standing in the doorway, unsure what to say. Honestly, I wasn't even sure what I was waiting for. Then she finally spoke. "I don't know what to do anymore." Her voice sounded flat and empty. I froze. Those words hung in the room like a warning, and suddenly I had the feeling I wasn't about to hear anything good. "What do you mean?" I asked as my heart started beating faster. She looked over at me, and for a brief moment I thought I saw real vulnerability in her eyes. I don't know. I feel like I've lost myself." She hesitated before quietly adding, "I don't even know if I'm attracted to you anymore." Her words landed like a punch straight to my stomach. For a few seconds I couldn't even react. I just stood there trying to process what she'd said. None of it made sense. We had been together for years, and no matter how many ups and downs we'd gone through, we always managed to keep moving forward. Even during the times when it felt like we were growing apart, we somehow found our way back. But this felt completely different. It wasn't just about stress. It wasn't about falling into another boring routine. She was admitting something much deeper, something that instantly made me question everything about our relationship. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to convince myself it was only the alcohol talking. I wanted to believe we could work through it together. But the look on her face stopped me. She seemed distant, almost resigned, like she wasn't expecting me to fix anything. It wasn't only about attraction anymore. It was something much bigger. "I don't know why I feel this way," she continued, her words becoming slightly more slurred. "I don't know how we ended up here, but I can't pretend anymore." She let out a bitter laugh and slowly shook her head. "I thought I could, but I can't. I'm sorry." I had no idea what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part of me wanted to tell her I understood. But the truth was, I didn't. How could I understand something I had never seen coming? How could I understand a betrayal that wasn't about another man, but about me? She took another sip of wine and kept staring into the distance as though she wasn't even in the room anymore. "You're a good guy," she said quietly. "You really are." Then she sighed. "But I don't even know if I like myself anymore, let alone anyone else." Her words lingered in the silence, and I could feel every one of them pressing down on me. My chest tightened. I had spent so much time trying to make our marriage work, trying to show her that I was still there, still committed, still willing to fight for us. Yet, in that moment, it felt like none of it mattered. A strange mixture of heartbreak and anger started building inside me. How could she say something like that so casually? Did she ever stop to think about what those words would do to me? What about all those years together? All the memories? All the quiet moments we shared? Had any of it meant anything? Had I meant anything to her at all? Then, little by little, I felt myself going numb. It was almost like my mind was shutting everything down to protect me from what I had just heard. I knew I should have said something. I should have asked questions. I should have tried to understand. But I couldn't. I stayed silent. The silence between us felt heavy, and my thoughts were completely scattered. I honestly don't know how long we stayed like that. She kept drinking while I stood across the room, too stunned to move. At some point, she fell asleep on the couch. The wine glass was still in her hand, and the empty bottle sat on the table beside her. I stood there in the dim light, feeling like I was looking at a stranger inside my own home. This was my wife, the woman I had built my life with. Yet somehow, in that moment, she felt so distant, so completely out of reach. I couldn't stay there any longer. I grabbed my coat, feeling the cold fabric against my skin, and quietly walked out the front door without saying a word. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I would do once I got there. All I knew was that I had to leave. I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't be around her after everything she had just told me. So, I walked away. I never looked back. Update 1. The next day, I didn't go home. Instead, I checked into a small hotel while I tried to figure out what I was supposed to do next. At first, I felt completely numb. Then, little by little, the weight of the decision I'd made started catching up with me. It was like a wave rolling in after I'd already stepped into the water. Even now, I still don't know what the right decision was. The first few days passed in a blur. I spent most of my time sitting alone in that hotel room, staring at the walls and trying to make sense of everything. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going from there. I just needed some space. I needed to breathe without constantly feeling the pressure of her presence weighing on me. The days after I left were unbelievably quiet, too quiet. I kept replaying that conversation over and over in my head. I'm not attracted to you anymore. Every time I heard those words in my mind, they seemed even louder than before. How had we ended up like this? How had I missed it? Was it the way she'd become more distant over the last few months? Was it all those late nights at work? Had I done something wrong? Or maybe the worst possibility, was it something I had failed to do? I didn't want to think about those questions. I really didn't. But they refused to leave me alone. The harder I tried to bury them, the stronger they came back, like a dam that was getting ready to burst. I never called her. I never sent her a text. Every time I thought about reaching out, my mind went completely blank. What was I supposed to say? Was there even a way to fix this? Was there anything left to save? I'd already spent so much time trying to make our marriage work. I'd tried everything I could think of. What if this was simply the end? What if this was the truth I'd been afraid to face all along? Maybe her feelings had started fading long before she admitted it. Maybe I had been too blind to notice. I tried keeping myself busy. I buried myself in work and caught up on things I'd been putting off, hoping it would help numb the pain. It didn't. Nothing worked. The silence in that hotel room was deafening. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Her expression looked distant and cold, like she had already become a stranger. About a week later, I finally went back to the apartment. Walking inside felt strange. The silence was different now. It wasn't just because the place was quiet. It was because her confession still seemed to hang in the air like a shadow I couldn't escape. She was sitting on the couch with her head in her hands, almost as if she'd been waiting for me. When I walked in, she slowly looked up. Her eyes were swollen and her face was filled with shame, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Honestly, I was surprised she was still there. Part of me had expected she'd pack her things and leave. "You came back?" she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't pretend everything was normal. The tension between us felt like touching a live wire. "I just need to get my things," I finally said. My voice sounded emptier than I meant it to. There was nothing else I needed to explain. We both knew why I had come. The air between us felt thick, almost impossible to breathe. She slowly stood up, her eyes moving around the room like she didn't know where to look. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice shaking. I never meant to hurt you. Stop. I cut her off before she could continue. I don't want to hear it right now. My voice came out sharper than I expected. I don't know what you expect me to say, but please don't make this any harder than it already is. She flinched, but she didn't step away. She just stood there, her face impossible to read. I could see she was hurting. I could see she wanted to make things right, but I wasn't sure I could let her. We stood there in silence for what felt like forever. Everything she'd said that night kept running through my mind. I couldn't forget it. I couldn't push it aside. Before I came back, I thought I could handle this. Standing there in front of her made me realize I couldn't. I don't know if I can do this, I finally said quietly. My words felt heavy. I couldn't even tell if what I was feeling was regret, anger, sadness, or all of them at once. I don't know if I can fix us. I paused before adding, I don't even know if I want to. It looked like my words hit her just as hard as hers had hit me. She didn't answer right away. She simply stared at me, her face pale, as though she was trying to find a response to something that had already been decided. The truth was finally out. We were standing at the edge of something there was no coming back from. Do you want to leave? She asked. I didn't answer her right away. I couldn't tell if she was asking because she truly wanted me to leave or because she thought it would make everything easier for both of us. Either way, I no longer felt like I belonged there. That place didn't feel like home anymore, and it definitely didn't feel like the marriage I had poured everything into. I think I need to, I finally said. My voice sounded calm, even though everything inside me was falling apart. I think it's time. I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned around, walked into the bedroom, and started packing my things. It was strange. The apartment I'd lived in for years suddenly felt unfamiliar. The bed, the couch, the kitchen. Everything that had once made me feel comfortable now felt like it belonged to someone else's life. She stayed in the living room. Just knowing she was there was almost more than I could handle. I didn't want to look at her, not after everything she'd confessed. Once I finished packing, I picked up my bags and headed toward the front door. She was still sitting in the same place, staring ahead with an empty expression, almost as if time had stopped for her. Neither of us said goodbye. We didn't need to. There wasn't anything left to say. I walked out, and the door clicked shut behind me. The sound felt final in a way I hadn't expected. I had no idea where I was going. I didn't know what my future looked like anymore. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay there with her any longer. Update 2. It's been several days since I walked away. I'm still trying to figure out what comes next. Every day feels like a strange combination of relief and confusion. Sometimes I catch myself thinking I'll wake up and everything will somehow go back to normal. Then I remember it won't. And honestly, I'm not even sure I want it to. The first few days after I left were filled with numbness and anger. For a while I stayed with a friend. After that I spent a few nights in a cheap motel. It didn't matter where I went. The silence followed me everywhere. Leaving felt like the right decision. At the same time, it felt completely wrong. There was no clean ending, no instant closure. You don't simply walk away from years of marriage and expect everything to make sense overnight. Instead, it felt like I was wandering through thick fog without knowing where I was supposed to go. I kept reminding myself that I'd done the right thing. How could I stay in a marriage where my own wife admitted she wasn't attracted to me anymore? Still, it hurt. More than I wanted to admit. Every time I picked up my phone, I wondered if she'd tried to contact me. I thought about checking for messages. I wondered if she regretted what she'd said. I wondered if she was trying to save what was left of us. But I never looked. I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready. About a week later, I found myself sitting alone in a small diner late one evening. There was a cup of coffee in front of me that had already gone cold. I wasn't there because I was hungry. I just needed somewhere to sit. The quiet buzz of conversations around me and the sounds coming from the kitchen were enough to keep me from feeling completely alone. Without thinking, I started scrolling through old pictures on my phone. I wasn't even paying attention until my screen lit up with a notification. Her name. I froze. For several long seconds, I just stared at it. My finger hovered over the message. It was only one text, but somehow it felt heavier than anything else I'd carried that week. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Instead, I opened it. We need to talk, please. I'm sorry for everything. I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose you. I can't fix this without you. I read the message once, then again, and again. Each sentence landed like another blow to my chest. I couldn't make sense of what I was feeling. There was anger, there was sadness, there was still love, and somewhere underneath all of that, I could feel her regret. Despite everything she'd done, a small part of me still wanted to believe she meant every word. I kept staring at the screen until the letters started to blur together. My thoughts wouldn't slow down. What did I actually want? What did I need from her now? Could I ever trust her again? Could I really forgive what she'd said? Could I ever look at her the same way? I finally set my phone down and rubbed my face, trying to clear my head. I didn't answer her that night. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. But I also knew I couldn't avoid the truth forever. The following day, I found myself standing outside our apartment again. I honestly didn't know what I expected to find. Then the door opened. She stood there looking smaller than I remembered. The moment I saw her standing in the doorway, I realized something. I wasn't ready to forgive her. I wasn't even sure I wanted to. But I needed answers. I needed to hear why she'd said those things. I needed to know whether there was still any truth left in the life we'd built together. Without saying anything, she stepped aside and let me in. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Her face was filled with equal parts hope and fear. I walked inside. The silence between us felt even heavier than it had the last time. She couldn't even look me in the eyes. Instead, she quietly led me into the living room before sitting down and twisting her hands together nervously. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never should have said those things. I never wanted to hurt you." She took a shaky breath. "I was drunk, and I was angry at myself. I've been avoiding everything for so long. I've been trying to figure out who I am, and instead, I ended up hurting you." I stayed near the doorway, unsure what to say. Her apology sounded sincere. She clearly regretted what she'd done, but somehow, her words still felt incomplete, like they were only covering the surface of something much deeper. I had a feeling there was still more she wasn't telling me. I had no idea what she expected from me anymore. Did she really think we could pick up where we left off? Or was this simply her way of trying to close a chapter she couldn't bring herself to leave unfinished? "I don't know if I can forgive you," I finally said. The words sounded more final than I meant them to. The truth was, I wasn't even sure I could forgive myself, let alone her. "You told me you weren't attracted to me anymore," I said. "How are we supposed to come back from something like that?" She flinched as if my words had reminded her of exactly what she'd said that night. "I didn't mean it," she replied quickly. "I swear I didn't. I was so lost in everything that was happening. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I thought I could figure everything out on my own, but I couldn't. And now I realize I never should have pushed you away." Neither of us spoke for a moment. I let her words hang between us while I looked at her. Really looked at her. She looked exhausted, completely worn down. The woman I had married, the woman who used to look at me like I meant everything to her, now looked like only a shadow of the person I remembered. I wasn't expecting to see that. I never imagined she would look this lost, or this broken. And the hardest part was realizing I had no idea how to fix any of it. "I don't know if I can go back to the way things were," I finally admitted. "I don't know if we can just act like none of this happened." She slowly shook her head, her hands trembling. "I don't want you to pretend," she said quietly. "I just want a chance to fix this. I don't want to lose you." I stood there staring at her while her words settled in. Part of me wanted to walk away. My mind kept telling me that leaving was the safest thing I could do. But another part of me, the part I'd been trying to bury ever since I left, still wanted to believe her. Maybe it was because of everything we'd been through together. Maybe it was because the last week had been so lonely. Or maybe it was both. "I think we need some time," I finally said. The words felt like the only thing keeping us from falling apart completely. "Maybe we both need some time to figure out what we really want." She nodded slowly, relief and sadness showing on her face at the same time. "I'll give you all the time you need," she said. "I'm not going to pressure you. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, and I'll be here whenever you're ready." I still didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if we could rebuild everything we'd lost. I didn't know if we would slowly find our way back to each other, or if we'd keep drifting farther apart until there was nothing left. But for the first time in days, I felt like there might actually be a path forward. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe we could start over. Or maybe the right answer was to let each other go and learn how to move on. Whatever happened, it wasn't going to happen overnight. It was going to take time. For the first time since I walked out of that apartment, I wasn't afraid of that. I just needed to figure out what I truly wanted. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since we had that conversation. Since then, we've been giving each other space. Everything feels different now. It's almost like we're both waiting to see what the other person will do next. I still don't know what the future has in store for us. Maybe we'll find a way to work through everything. Maybe we'll finally accept that it's over. Right now, I honestly don't know. I guess only time will tell.